Another video response, this time to, I assume, Osama Abdallah. I am not sure if it's him, because the man has been inactive for some time in the debating field. His video, this video is a response to Jesus Christ was never buried underground nor ever died according to the New Testament itself, and I hope to provide a feasible response to Osama. Let's begin. One of the points that Osama makes in the video is that Jesus had received medical treatment inside the tomb, and that also he was never buried underground or in a coffin. He was laid on the floor alive. Well, firstly, if any Christian knows that Jesus was not buried underground, of course he was buried above ground inside a tomb. I don't think I've ever heard any Christian who's made the claim that Jesus was put inside a coffin. He was buried in a tomb that was above ground. So Osama's argument there is just pointless. But it doesn't prove that Jesus was alive. Let's carry on. He also made the claim that Jesus never actually died. He was always been alive in the tomb receiving medical treatment. And he bases it off the misuse of a word which is translated as spices. The Greek word in Christian is aromata. Now, one of the comments that Osama made in the video below was the following to someone. And I'll read Osama's comment. Read the biblical verse references I gave you in the description. Mary Magdalene and the other women came with medicine. Your English translations say spices. To massage him, to wipe him, to treat him again. Again, the English translation said anoint, which is misleading. Jesus needed healing, and the women were attending him. And though the Roman soldiers didn't have a problem with that. After all, Pilate didn't want Jesus dead, and he said, I wash my hands from any guilt towards this man. It was a response to Eric S. First of all, the burden of proof is on Osama to show, and I'm no expert in the Greek language myself, but most translations I've looked at say spices. The burden of proof is on Osama Abdallah himself to prove how the English translations mistranslate aromata, because most of them say spices. And he has also got to show how anoint is a mistranslation as well. That burden of proof is also on him. And I do wish that Osama would provide the references. Any Greek lexicon which proves his assertion. According to blueletterbible.org, the translation of aroma in the New Testament would be spices or sweet spices. That's the English equivalent. So the burden of proof is on Osama to show where the translation says medicine. I challenge you, Osama, to provide that. Osama then misquotes John 20, particularly verses 15 to 29. Here's the point 2. He says, also notice in John 20:15, Mary thought Jesus was a gardener after he healed and rose back up. Well, I'm not sure what the connection he is making. She turned round. If Osama had bothered to read the context, Mary is looking away from Jesus, then she turns round and then is shocked to find out it is Jesus. In verse 17, Jesus said to her, do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. And he was trying to say, well, he was still in pain. He told Mary Magdalene, touch me not. If Jesus was still alive after crucifixion, can you explain to me, Osama, how Jesus, after being nailed to a cross, and before that being subject to 39 lashes, his back raw with blood, his muscles being exposed, can you tell me how Jesus, if he survived, would be standing up after 3 days? Are you kidding me, Osama? Can you explain that? And to point of fact, Jesus tells you why he says, do not cling on to me. He says, for I have not yet ascended to the Father, but go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your father to my God and your God. That's why he said, don't cling to me. It was nothing to do with Jesus being in pain. So the context refutes Osama on that point. You know, it's funny, also, because Osama appealing to John 20:19-29, which we'll get into in a minute. Let's look at the passages that Osama brought up. Not only their context, but also to see whether the context refutes Osama. And I believe, scripturally, it does. And you can't dismiss the Bible as corrupted, or dismiss a particular section as corrupted, because Osama appealed to it. In fact, even Sam pointed out that this sort of thing was irrational to Osama in his debate in 2004. Let's examine Mark 14 carefully. No, sorry, Mark 15. He quotes from 4 to 7 to try and say, you know, that Jesus was... Now, the reason he quotes that is to say Jesus was never buried underground, but we've already sorted that out. I mean, of course, no Christians made the claim that Jesus was buried underground. As I said before, it was a pointless objection that Osama brought up. But let's read the context when Jesus is on the cross. Let's see what he said. This is in verse 33 of Mark 15. And when the 6th hour came, there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour. And at the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? Alright, we'll skip a little bit to verse 37. And Jesus uttered a loud cry and breathed his last. Next, we'll go to the book of Luke. And as Sam Shamoon pointed out to Abdul Rahman, if the book is good enough to prove your case, it is good enough to refute you. And you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't quote the book when it agrees with you and then reject it when it refutes you. If that same book of Luke is good enough to prove Osama's case, then it's good enough to refute him. Let's go to Luke 23. This is before 24. This is before the women come to the tomb. This is what Jesus says in Luke 23:46. Then Jesus, calling out with a loud voice, said, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. And having said this, he breathed his last. There it is again. Same Greek word that's found in the other passage I read. The Greek word is expenosin. Forgive me for my mispronunciation of the Greek. And that very word indicates he died. No other way of looking around it. It can also mean breathed or expired. So there's no other way of Osama getting around this. In John 19 verse 30, it doesn't contain the phrase expenusin. It doesn't contain that phrase. But nevertheless, the context still indicates his death. When Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, It is finished, and he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. In the Greek it says, paradoken to pneuma. That's what it says there. I have the interlinear Bible in front of me. It says, in fact, what it says is, and having bowed the head, he yielded up his spirit. That's what it says, but it still indicates death in the context. It's very clear that even with Osama's dazzling display of showing a very old footage of a Jesus film, it's safe to say that Osama is incorrect to say that Jesus was never died according to the New Testament. Now, he's correct that Jesus was not buried underground, and that he was buried in it. But Jesus was buried in a tomb. Obviously, it was above ground. You know, Osama's correct on that. But that doesn't help his case, because Jesus still died. Yes, he was buried above ground and placed in a rich man's tomb. He still died according to the context of the very books he appealed to. As mentioned earlier, if the very book he appealed to is good enough to prove his case, it's good enough to bury and damn his religion. Now I wonder what Osama Abdullah's response to this will be. I'll just have to wait and see. Hope this has helped you guys. Thanks for watching.